Good afternoon and welcome to the Tuesday, February 7th meeting of the Watershed Committee. We have many members of the committee here this afternoon, as well as many members of the staff. First order of business, calling the meeting to order. Our second order of business is approval of the minutes from September 6th. So I don't know if everybody's had a chance to take a look at those. If you had any comments, questions, concerns on those.
Great job, Linda. Thank you.
Okay, seeing none, we'll consider those adopted.
Okay.
So getting right into our committee discussion. So have Bob and Eric here that can kind of chime in as we go. And Mike's pulling up the maps for it, but we've been busy as usual doing our stream cleanings around town. This was last we talked with this group. I think we were still finishing up the Black Forest neighborhood, so off of Harris Road. We were kind of done with that. I think we shared some of that and actually toured that in June and then finished that up in the fall. And then given we've had a relatively late winter without a lot of snow, the DPW crew has done a great job of not only doing stream cleaning, but starting to work on some of our ponds, and we'll talk about that a little bit later in the agenda. But Mike has pulled up on the screen one of the areas that draining into the Hip Brook Preserve off the end of Coachman Brome Drive, and Mike's highlighting where we came in there, was cleaning that drainage way going into the main line of Hip Brook. So they cleaned that first portion. I think we had some snow, some other stuff they'd pull off, but then they came back and completed the second portion. We've been having some drainage issues on the Splendor Wood neighborhood, Fiddler's Hollow. So the back end of those neighborhoods discharge, right where Mike's showing behind those homes is the drainage out of the neighborhood. There's a pond at the end of Splendor Wood, that's where their discharge is. So with some blockages, some additional debris in that channel that wasn't flowing as well as it once did, those homeowners were starting to see that their yards were a little wetter, squishier all season round. So they did the drainage work in those neighborhoods to open that up. So we'll probably have to wait to spring, summer to kind of see how that works out. But as usual, did a nice job with that. Partnered well with the Genesee Land Trust. They're always a good partner working with us since it's on their property. That allow us to go in on their land and do the work that's needed. I think they've developed a trust with us. We're not looking to drain the wetlands. We're not looking to do that, but just to make sure that the channels are open and draining properly. So we've worked well with that group, and they've obviously been accommodating to allow us onto their property to keep that stuff open and flowing. And I think one of the things that we've seen across town, and as we get into some of these other areas and areas we're having the DPW walk this year, is they're seeing more trees down than ever before. So we've had the emerald ash borer come through, and the trees have died off years ago, but now with a lot of the windstorms we've seen, their crews are notifying us that we've got more trees down and areas that we haven't seen before. So we do have annual stream walks where they go out and walk the streams and take a look at those for us. Mike's pulling up the second one. Any questions on Coachman Brome, Splendorwood before we jump to the next one? So this is one where we did have, it kind of started with trees down. So we were notified by a neighbor. So this is Fellows Road. And then it goes to Glen Eagle Way. So we're right up against the town line. So that's where we border with Perrington. This went in as the Fox Hill Fairview neighborhood. And there's actually, was in the original design, two parallel ponds that is split by the stream. So there's actually an equalization pipe that goes under the stream and then feeds both ponds from both sides. Mike's highlighting that, and then the flow comes into those ponds. So over time, the outfall structures have gotten overgrown. The spillways had gotten overgrown. And then even had trees that were falling into the creek in the middle. So we were notified by a neighbor several years ago, and the time it took us to get the permit, that the trees were falling and starting to collect debris, causing a drainage issue there. So, working with those neighbors as well as the DEC, applied for the joint app. It takes us several years to get that, and then most recently the DPW was able to go in. Again, neighbors were all on private property, so we're not handling individual drainage on private property, but handling the mainline channel, but still need releases from the neighbors. Allowed us to go in, clean that piece out, and I think we're done except for final seeding.
No, I seeded it.
Okay. I know we had kind of ditched that out and then just waiting for it to freeze up a little bit before it.
Yeah, it froze and I got in there.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, good question. Does DEC allow you to go in and just clean and snag without a out, or
They-
is their take?
They do, but they're getting, so if it's outside of wetland, yes. So as long as we're not disturbing the soil, as long as we're not digging into the water, the stream itself, yeah, we can pull stuff out. Unfortunately, it's usually not the tree that's right next to the road. It's not the one that's right, nearby a property. So often we've got to do some clearing to get into the tree to pull that out. The DEC has gotten very restrictive on equipment in wetlands. So in the last go-around with permits, we've been working on them with, they don't want us to take any equipment into a wetland. They say we can still remove the tree on our own without equipment, but some of the trees we're looking at are 4 and 5 foot diameter trees, so just logistically, that's near impossible for us to
Pull it by hand.
drop a tree, move it by hand, cut it up into pieces. That just becomes, an issue, safety issue, asking employees to, move logs that are hundreds of thousands of pounds and everything else. So that just becomes, quite cumbersome with that. But they've pushed back on us of going into wetland areas. If it's not in a wetland, yes, we can go in if we have access to it. And that's why once we get a lot of these channels open, commission ditch, others, we try to go in at least once a year and kind of mow down the suckers, the trees, the saplings that come up. So then if we do have a tree falls down, it falls across the ditch, we can track in, pluck the tree out, put it on the side, opens the flow back up. We don't have to do soil disturbance. We don't have to get a permit and everything else. We can just track in and get it at. But this was one that there's quite a few trees down. You can see, it's a tight space between the two ponds. The ponds were filled up areas. That was a tight access for us to get in to get to that. Any other questions? So I say we're working up against the town of Perrington. I know the neighbors still have a little bit of concern going south, but I say that goes out of our town line, so they'll have to work with the town of Perrington if they want to get that stream ditch clean to the south. So that goes outside of our town and outside of our jurisdiction.
How are other towns surrounding us as far as continuing our process?
Not great. I think Penfield has kind of set the standard for cleaning our drainage ways, to the board's, attributes that the town board has always supported it. We have a townwide drainage fund, so, we look at, everybody pays into the drainage fund. So we try to do our best to keep the streams, creeks, ponds in the best function that they can. So when we do get a large storm event, in past recent years, we've fared fairly well. Other towns don't prioritize it, whether they don't have a drainage fund, whether they don't have political will, whether they don't have, support of the staff to do it or the equipment. It's taken us several years to get the equipment. We used to hire it out. It's hundreds of thousands of dollars when we used to hire it out and had other companies do it for us. So we've got and have the expertise in-house with our staff, and have, the town board has invested money into buying the equipment over the years for it.
Can I
allows us to-
interject in
Sure.
there? At the recent supervisors meeting that they have monthly, we were commended, and other supervisors in our surrounding towns were saying that, Penfield really sets the standards and makes us look a little bit, a little bit bad in our towns, because we're always on top. You guys are always on top of things, making sure they are clean, and we do, as Mark said, have the resources and the wherewithal to continue. So it's good and bad. It's very good for us, and our other surrounding towns or adjacent towns, I should say. But what they say about the DPW here, the guys doing the work. Thank you.
Yeah, and we've actually had questions from the DEC. Why are things so much worse in Penfield? You guys are always asking and putting in permits when no other community is. So they came to us and said, what are you guys doing wrong, or what's the issue? Well,
We're doing it.
we're doing it. We've got funding for it, so we'll keep doing it as long as we can. We did the Finger Lakes piece down by Broccolo's. We hadn't been in there in who knows whenever. You had trees that were there, 50-year-old trees, and
5 foot diameter trees are bigger.
that are growing out of the stream. We're not looking to take old growth trees down just out there, but literally growing out of the stream channel that are blocking it. And then you wonder why the drainage doesn't work. We hadn't been there in 50 years, so we're trying to get into a cycle. We share that at all of our meetings, that we try to get around, and now I think we're starting to see the fruits of those labor of the last 15 years of what we've done. A little bit of setback, I think, from the dead ash trees and some of those falling down, but if we can get in and pull those out, that's easier than trying to, open up a whole stream channel and get those flowing again. So even the DECs I asked and said, what's going on in Penfield and why are you guys different than everybody else? Any other questions, conversation on Fellows Roads? That one's wrapped. Bob's seeded it, so we'll get that growing and check on it back in the springtime once the grass gets growing, make sure that's done and wrapped up and stabilized. So the most recent one we've started on is Fallbrook and Scribner Road. So this kind of came to light as part of the newer development with Shady Rock. Looked at that and realized that, there was the drainage coming out of the school district, the pipe was actually below the level of the creek. So it's just shown how much it had silted in over the years. So we put in a permit from Treebrook all the way over to Scribner Road to clean that drainage way. We do have town-owned land through that area that goes between those two neighborhoods. So Fallbrook, Treebrook, and then on into Shady Rock. That does go through private property. So that would be private property, but we don't own a new piece that's the pond there now. So the crews have been working through, Mike's highlighting that again. So the crews have started on the Scribner Road side, working their way down through. I've gotten to Fallbrook, and I think you guys have crossed over Fallbrook and now going
Yes.
westward towards Treebrook on that
Yep.
other side. So as always, it causes a little bit of concern from neighbors, and we're taking out some trees, but unfortunately the size of equipment we need to get in order to maintain the streams, it's a bigger swath than what the neighbors would like and what we'd like to do, but
Maybe you want to
necessary
mention, maybe you
necessary.
want to mention too, the website, how we're doing, and Mr. Tate is good enough
Yeah.
to be updating you and the website.
Yeah, Eric, I don't know if you want to.
On it.
Sure. So with that, with a lot of the work our DPW crews are doing right now, we are posting updates on the website, just to inform the public kind of what's going on, where you may see crews, what they're doing, why, and what the extent of the work is. This happened to be one of the actual kind of first updates and even kind of carried over into the most recent update that was put out, late yesterday or early this morning. So, we have put at least tried to make the intent to get the notice out to the residents. I've been answering every email and phone call that I've gotten about it. Fortunately, only been a few. So kind of trying to get the notice out ahead of time and then answer questions as they come in.
Yeah,
Eric, for the sake of not just those of us here, but the people who might be listening or watching, could you give us the web address that they should go? What section of the town website should they go to?
So I can't tell you exactly
Mike can
what that
pull
is
it
off
up.
the top of my head.
You just click on that first
You can click
tab,
it
so
right
it's on
there.
the,
Yep.
It is so under the projects of community interest, there is a specific tab for DPW projects, and that would be the link to go to.
Okay, so
The website
projects of
itself is
community
kind of
interest.
long, and I don't know
There we go. It's
Nope.
right coming up on your screen right now.
Okay, good. I think that's just kind of good for people, people watching at home to see
Yeah.
too.
Perfect, thank you.
yep, no, that's a great thing to highlight, and a great new addition is they've added tree trimming in there. People are, wondering why or what, the DPW is tree trimming, what's going on with that. So this is a new spot that the supervisors added to, highlight where we're doing work, what's going on, and then, we carry through for oil and stone season, but also for, stream cleaning projects. So it's a great new addition to the website. Any questions on that one?
Nice job on that website.
So the next one, and hopefully this is a project we'll be getting into this summer, is Allen's Creek. We've talked about that for many years now. We finally have a permit. So late breaking news, we just got a permit from the DEC to take on the work. Currently, we're still talking with Green Court Partners. Mike's pulling up the map, so it's on the back of Burroughs Hills and Shirewood is the stream area. We'll be scheduling a public information meeting with those neighbors shortly. We've talked to them through the years, but haven't done any update with them recently. So need to do public information with that group. But we're working with Green Court Partners, and Mike can highlight that property. They've got an area on the back of their land we talked about last year that's outside the floodplain. There's an upland area that they are entertaining us to take the dredged material, so we've got to create some splash pools in there. We've got to create some other areas to, have the water slow down going through there. So we're generating between 7,000 and 10,000 yards of sand and gravel. So rather than paying the cost to truck that out of there, that group, it's kind of an inaccessible area for them. It's about 80 to 100 feet below where the mobile homes sit on a lower area, but they're entertaining for us to, put it on their property. So going back and forth with the lawyers a little bit, some questions about testing just to make sure, there's not contaminated material with it. So just getting that resolved now, but yeah, that could be a big savings for the town to not have to truck that material out of there. Just put it in a deposit on their property, topsoil, seed it, cover it up, let it grow back to nature after that, but could save a lot and a lot of, impact of trucking that stuff out. So, but we do finally have the permit from the DEC. We are working with that Green Court Partners, and then we'll be looking very shortly to schedule a meeting with those neighbors, bring them in here, share the project, share, the extent of what we're looking to do, get that out to bid, and then have that a summer construction this year. Because again, we're confined by trout runs, salmon runs, and then long-eared bat season on the back end. As we have trees to take down or other stuff we've got to do in that area, but hopefully get in, stabilize that stream, stabilize those slopes so, we don't have any more hill slides, we don't have further erosion. As you can zoom in on some of those properties, you can see quite a bit of an extension erosion. I think by 122, you can see how wide the creek is getting in spots. So further to the right a little bit, Mike, you can see how wide the creek is getting in some of those areas that it's moving away from where it used to be, and it's scouring into that slope. So these neighbors are losing feet of their backyard every year, and especially after storm events, now it's becoming a wide and almost putting them like a delta in the middle. So you can see that area, there's some deposit of sediments. Now the stream is almost splitting, depositing some of the sediment in the middle that's scouring on the upper end, and then creating two stream paths. So part of our project would be to obviously restabilize that, put the stream back into its original location, stabilize those backyards for those neighbors. But working with them to, those neighbors are all in floodplain, at least their backyards are, so re-engaging the floodplain. So in a storm event, the creek, will come up. They may have water in their backyard, but that's part of what the floodplain is. And if the creek is too confined, then it goes faster and faster and starts undercutting those slopes, and that's when we had that slope failure a couple years ago to undercut some of those sandy.
Hey, Mark, can I ask a question on that? When you mentioned the soils being tested in certain parts, I don't know anything about that, but I assume there's all different sections you're testing randomly, or?
We had done initial samples, and that's something the DEC wanted to know before once we take this material out, what is it? We said most of it's sand and gravel, so when we did a gradation sample saying it's cobbles, it's going to be boulders, it's going to be rocks and sand, so it's really not a lot of true sediment. But then two, is there anything heavy metals in it, anything contaminated in it? So if we're trucking it off, you need to know where are you trucking it to. Can it be used as general fill? Does it need to go to a landfill? Does it need to be considered hazardous waste? And then you pay a higher cost for it to be buried. So we did initial testing at the DEC's request, sampled 3 different spots down the stream, just pulled some grab samples out. They tested it, came back, said it didn't exceed any levels. It was a hazardous material anywhere. But Green Court, as anyone would have concern if we're going to deposit material on their property, the property owners as well as the mortgager wants to know that we're not depositing anything on their property that would be of a hazardous condition or create that situation. So we're just working out what do they want us to test for, how many samples do they want. So we've got all that ahead of time, and then that'll be right in the bid package when the contractor does their bid, saying you've got to take 6 samples here, here, and here. We also want to test their property ahead of time so we know if we're putting it on their property, is there a situation beforehand or after? And then, everybody's happy at the end that it's clean material. It'll be sand and gravel and boulders and cobbles and whatever else, as we dig it up and then put it there and then cover it up with topsoil and seed and let it grow back to just kind of an overgrown brushy area right now. So then let it grow back to its natural state afterwards.
Mark, just to give us sort of a perspective, the volume of materials that's going to be removed, once it's spread, how large an area of coverage is that roughly?
I think it was about 200 feet by 30 feet wide by 2 feet high, I think is what we had spec'd out.
Yes, correct.
I could do the calculation,
Yeah,
but,
yeah, no,
so in that area, I don't know if we can pull up the contours, we can kind of see at the base of that slope, so you can kind of get a perspective of, you know, from an aerial view, it looks like we're putting this deposit right in someone's backyard that lives there. But you can see the extent of the slope going down, so those units, those homes at the top, you can see almost go down 100 feet. So then we would be placing that kind of in a linear fashion along the base of that slope. So for them, Green Court Partners, we're basically stabilizing their slope. We put some additional material at the bottom,
Good.
help stabilize the base of their slope. So it just kind of run along that bottom edge and be 30 feet wide, so 2 feet high. So once it's done and covered over, years from now, you wouldn't even
Yeah,
you know,
so
really know
it'll
it's
help
there. It just
stabilize
kinda
that
looks-
slope too at the
So
same time.
for them, they're looking at it as a benefit. That's why they've been open to it. It's not a, you know, a buildable area for them or a usable area. As you can see, it's well down the slope. And we wouldn't even have access from that side, so we'd be accessing from the Burrows Hills, Shirewood Drive neighborhoods. We've got to establish some access points from those neighbors to get equipment in, get materials in. We've been stockpiling rock for a number of years from projects we've got different cobbles and boulders. We're waiting for that, so we've got that for the contractors to place on their property. So hopefully we're finally there, and it's a project we've visited as this group several times and walked those backyards
Yeah.
and talked about it for
Years.
many, many years, so hopefully we're
Are
finally.
the plans done yet, or are they still in the
Nope,
process?
plans are all done. We've just got to get the bid specs together, so their work, Barton LaJudas is our consultant for that, so they're working on the bid specs now. One of the last hurdles, obviously, was getting the permit from the DEC, so they've been waiting for that, and then now we're just trying to finalize that agreement with Green
What's
Court
the
to
construction window because of the fish and,
June 15th to October 15th.
can it be done in that time frame?
We hope so. I
To
mean,
me, it's possible.
yeah. So obviously, dependent upon the weather, dependent, you know, we
Yeah.
hope for the dry summer season. You know, they'll have to bypass pump, you know, the creek, you know, in those areas, or cordon off areas so they can, you know, work in the dry, so they're not having issues with it. Obviously, if it's a dry summer, you don't see it being an issue. Obviously, if we have lots of rains, then, you know, that could complicate it, but.
We should take part of our walking tour, although
Well, hopefully
won't-
June will be just ready to get started.
get
so
started, so we'll be able to.
We'll be
put
ready
on
to
there.
go, so that's,
Maybe we ought to have a special meeting in the summer during the construction.
we can do a tour, summer tour as
Yeah.
well. If, once we get into it and this group wants to see it, we can do a summer walking
Put
tour as well.
her name badge on and just go down anyway.
Yeah. Anything else on Allen's Creek? Okay. So next is pond inspections, and as well as stream walks should be part of that. So every year, Rich Gross from the DPW volunteers to go out and walk a lot of our streams, walk our ponds, take a look at those. Much appreciation to him for volunteering to do that. So we come up with a list of streams we haven't looked at in a few years, have him go out and walk those. He's been, you know, bringing some others with him to kind of get them trained as well, look at the condition, and that's when he's coming back this year saying we've seen a lot more ash trees down, a lot more stuff that's fallen over in the windstorms. So some of the stuff from this year, I think there's maybe only one. In his walks this year, we may have to look at getting a permit to do any sort of dredging. The others, you know, would just be on a summer project list. The DPW can go out and, as you said, snag them out of the stream if we can get in there, pull them out. We don't have to dig, and therefore we don't need to get a permit. Anytime we dig, dredge, you know, have sediment deposition, then we need to get a permit from DEC. So this year, I think we only had one of the four that he went out and walked. That the others need help, but I think in order to get a permit on those. He also walks all of our ponds and takes a look at those. And again, you know, with a light snow winter, the DPW has had more opportunity to get out. They've been working on our ponds, keeping those up to date. That's a requirement of us being in MS4 to keep and maintain our ponds and keep those in good condition. It's also a requirement, and I don't know if our letters have gone out yet, but the letters are going out on Friday, to all the private pond owners, again, letting them know that they've got to do their inspections as well. So that's a requirement for us to enforce that they've got to do their inspections, hire an engineer to come out and look at their pond, tell them if they need maintenance, if they need to be cleaned up, and follow up on that. So all our letters are ready to go for this year and go out, but Rich Gross, again, thanks to him, and thanks to Eric and Bob for letting them go out to and walk those streams and those ponds for us is a great help. Anything else on? So our annual, just an update on ATIP. This group in the town board authorized a 3-year contract with ATIP. So typically we talk about it in the fall. We didn't this year just because we had done our 3-year approval with that, and then the town board also approved a 3-year contract. But that, and any of those watching at home, ATIP does a minimal amount of treatment just for excessive vegetation growth. So we do every year, and probably every watershed meeting share that we don't do treatment of algae, we don't do aesthetics as, far as making the water blue-green and everything else. Our job is to make sure it's functional. But we have some ponds that do have an excessive amount of lily pad growth, underwater vegetation that grows, cattails when they're in excess. But normally cattails are good around the pond. That's their function is to act as a wetland, a filter, keep geese and stuff from coming into ponds. Every once in a while in Tollwood, we've got one spot where they're treating. There's an excessive amount of cattail growth that's blocking the outfall structure, so they've done a little bit of treatment there. But otherwise, normally we leave the cattails in place. But ATIP has submitted their permits this year to DEC, so we've got those in already. Those are signed and done on our part, and then into DEC, and then typically it takes them a few months to process that, and then sometime in the June-July timeframe, ATIP will go out and do their treatment. So they've got to wait for the vegetation actually to come up and then treat the vegetation. So that'll be a June-July timeframe that they actually go in and do that work. But just to provide this committee an update that those are still ongoing, and we've done our stuff again for those. Again, I think I saw a massive amount of envelopes there. We've got to send notification out to everybody on the downstream channel that we're doing this treatment as part of the DEC permit. So as Mike's pulling up the downstream channel, so you can see how far that continues down, letting all those neighbors we're doing a treatment on it. And as it goes all the way to the bay, we've got to alert all those neighbors. So we've done it several years, in the past. Let those neighbors we're doing the treatment. ATIP is a certified company. They've got to do it at certain times of day. We block up the outfall structure, lower the pond so it has time for treatment. So it's not a hazardous condition, but it's still a requirement of the permit that we let them know that we're doing upstream treatment, that something's going on in their watershed. So those letters are ready to go out as well. Any questions, concerns on ATIP's piece? So moving into communications, so the Monroe County Stormwater Coalition, that group again is focused on, and we keep hearing that we're going to get another permit coming out sometime soon. We've said that for several years now, so I may sound a little bit like a broken record on that one, but we've shared some of the highlights of what we think it may include. Some additional catch basin cleaning, some additional processing that we've got to do on our end. So as part of the coalition, that group is a coalition of towns and villages around the county that looks at doing education through the H2O Hero. We've seen a lot of, this year is a big focus on plastics. So if you drive around, you've seen billboards around town talking about plastics in the environment, plastics in the area. So that's kind of been one of the highlight of education this year. But also, that group kind of helps staff, and Mike's pulling up the watershed page for our group, and then the links to the Stormwater Coalition. So that's a good page to reference, on their end as far as what materials are out there. But that group kind of is a coalition to get together to help prepare all the communities not only for an audit, which we had a couple of years ago, as well as make sure we're in compliance with those new regulations. So once those come out, that group will work together to make sure we're all on the same page, make sure if we've got to do additional education materials, if we do, that group does, a lot of training for us. We have the 4-hour certification for all of our people comes out of the Stormwater Coalition and also the Soil and Water. So that's training on erosion control, silt fence, other stuff. So we make sure that all of our foremen, all of our crews on site have training for that. So that's something provided by the Soil and Water and then the Stormwater Coalition as well. So we'll see when that permit comes out, but that's going to be, again, a new change for us and something else we need to comply with and something, there's 2 different permits. So there's a construction permit that applies to the contractors end of it, and then the MS4 permit is what applies to the towns and villages, and that's the rules we've got to follow. So once that comes out, we'll obviously update and adapt our regulations to make sure we're in compliance. I don't have any updates on the DEC EPA end of things. I don't have any additional old business. Does anybody have any new business to discuss this afternoon? No? Okay.
How stable is the ground for the equipment to be on right now?
For
When they're, for instance, cleaning ponds and stuff right now, or cleaning ditches, is it pretty stable, the ground?
Yeah, the ditches aren't too bad right now. They're high and dry. The one on Fellows Road was sloppy because the discharge wasn't going anywhere, so.
Right.
But the one we're on right now, it's high and dry.
Okay, good. So it'll
still a
be
bit of
less,
frost in the ground that's making it solid. So some of these, and especially with, going through the Hipbrook Preserve and others, we time it to be in the wintertime. So one, working with the land trust, they'd prefer us not to be in there in the springtime, not to prefer to disturb the vegetation that's
Right.
growing. And then if we can get there in the wintertime, get in, get out, get done, and then it grows back in the
makes-
springtime. We're on frozen ground, we're not sinking in, so
makes restoration a lot easier too.
yep, so some of it try to time to be in the summertime when it's dry, other times, we'll try to be in the wintertime, so when the vegetation's off the trees, you can see better, and then that's also why we do a lot of the stream walks in the wintertime. The vegetation's off the trees, you can actually get in and see where you're going a little bit better.
Mark, are there any big initiatives, or Eric, any sort of big initiatives coming up that have to do with watershed management, something, a la the Commission Ditch? I mean, big projects that are sort of on the horizon but haven't really been fully sort of formed yet?
Locally, or you're talking regionally from the state or the federal?
Well, I would say first, kind of build from the inside out, so Penfield and the county, and then maybe, sort of in our broader region.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, our big project coming up is Allen's Creek. We do our ongoing stream maintenance.
Right.
From the county, it's always, first and foremost, is staying in compliance with the permit. So that's why that MS4 permit hanging out there is kind of that's the benchmark we need to establish and we need to follow up on. And that obviously comes from a hand-me-down to the EPA. So the EPA dictates to New York State, then the DEC is responsible for passing that on to the towns and villages and then dictating, what new standards levels we've got to comply with. So that's kind of on I think it used to be a 5-year cycle with the MS4 permits. This last one's been delayed. I think COVID had a big deal to do with that. Then the last round, they submitted out a lot of stuff, and they got quite a bit of feedback from the towns and villages. They shared out, their wants and desires, or at least from the EPA, and the towns had a lot of concerns about just the amount of time, staffing, money, to keep up with it. And as we said earlier, I think we're one of the very progressive towns on keeping ahead of all this stuff. There's a lot of towns and villages. There's only one code enforcement, DPW, building inspector in the town, and trying to keep up with all these stormwater regulations and the amount of documentation as well as the work in the field is understandably, overwhelming for a lot of the smaller communities to try to keep up and keep in conformance. But I'm not aware of any other new regulations. This is kind of the main crux of it, and until it comes out, we kind of wait and see what's adopted, and once it's the law and once it's the regulation, then that's what that County Stormwater Coalition group, does well, is to, okay, let's break it apart. We've got it, education task force, construction group. It's not erosion control. There's a couple of different subgroups that then kind of parcel that out and then, decide how to kind of break that up and then help all the towns and villages get into compliance.
Yeah, I guess maybe by initiatives, I probably should have clarified. I was thinking of like big projects. So Allen's Creek, obviously, we know.
That's the biggest
Is there
one
anything
for us.
that Penfield would be involved in that's more county-wide or kind of region-wide?
The only thing we've been involved with recently is they're doing some culvert replacement, actually in Oak Hill, ahead of the PGA come in the spring, so they're doing some work in their area. Pittsford brought us in and brought in the town of Brighton, because obviously we're downstream, so Allen's Creek is the downstream of their work, and thankfully so they brought us in, shared with us what they're looking to do on their property, and then making sure that doesn't have impacts downstream to the rest of us. So that's the only thing that I know of that is kind of draining to us. Most of Penfield stuff, other than Arundequoit Creek, we kind of drain south into Perrington, north into Webster, or kind of west into Arundequoit Creek. But yeah, I'm not aware of any other countywide initiatives for anything currently.
Good.
Any other new business items of discussion for tonight? Okay. So our next meeting is March 7th. Same time, same location. Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. Appreciate the attendance. Appreciate everybody being here. We'll share out obviously our agenda and materials ahead of March 7th, and I think we'll add Allen's Creek definitely to our June walk list, and then look at, as that project rolls out, doing additional updates through the summer. So with that, we'll close this meeting of the Watershed Committee at 4:38 p.m. Thanks for coming.